Alright, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at some command line basics. And essentially what I want to do here is we want to cover some essential basic Windows commands, just like I just did a directory here. And then we're going to go and do some Linux commands from the Linux shell as well. So directory is very simple. If you just want to see a current listing of what's there, you enter that. Now I'm making a new directory called infosec. That's just with the mkdir command, and we can see now that as a result of doing that command, we now have a directory right there named infosec. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and change to that directory with the cd command, which is change directory. And that actually puts us into the infosec directory. Okay, so now I'm simply going to create a text file with the words infosec test file in quotes, and I'm writing that out to the current directory, and I'm naming it testfile.txt. So now if we open that file with Notepad, we'll see once we open it that it's got the contents of what we just put in the echo command in that text file. So let's go ahead and Notepad and then open that file, and we can see that it's got those words in it. Now I'm going through some of these basic essential commands because if you know these commands and know how to use them, once you take the ethical hacking class, it's going to make you go a lot smoother and make things come a lot faster for you. Alright, so that's the basics of doing that. We could also read this file with the more command. So one way to read a text file on the Windows command line is more, and we can see the contents there. So ipconfig shows us the current IP configuration. Basically it shows us the IP, the subnet mask, and the gateway. If we wanted to see details, we do ipconfig/all, and then we could see not only gateway and IP and subnet mask, we could see DNS server, DHCP server. We can also see DNS, lots of other information concerning that IP or concerning this machine's network configuration. Now if we had more than one card, we'd see all of its configurations. Now if we wanted to release this IP and get another one, we could do ipconfig release. Alright, that gets rid of that IP, and then ipconfig/renew sends a request to the DHCP server to lease us another IP. Now if the current lease period hasn't expired, as you can see here, it's going to most likely give you the same IP address that you got previously. Alright, netstat shows us basic network information as far as the card, what it's listening for and things. If we want to see all listening connections, we'll do netstat-an, and we can see all listening ports on this particular machine's network card. And this is useful for several things. For one, seeing who's connected to you. Alright, now let's look at some more things we could do on the command line that's going to be essential. Task list. Now if you go to Task Manager, this is the same as going to Control-Alt-Delete. I just type task mgr. You can see a list of currently running processes on the Processes tab. We can see the same thing by typing task list from the command line. Shows us the exact same information. Now if we wanted to investigate this, or we wanted to have it for historical purposes, we could write that out to a text file by simply doing task list and then is greater than, and then giving it a file name. So now if we read task.txt that I just created there, we can see that we've got that in a text file that we can go back and look at historically. There's some forensics relevance to that as well, but we're just covering basic command line right now. Alright, now with that being said, if you wanted to kill a task, so what I just did, you didn't see it on the screen, but I just started Firefox. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to now look for Firefox in the processes and then kill Firefox. Okay, so if we do task list again, we can see down here at the bottom, it looks like, yeah, there we go, we can see Firefox right here. Okay, and we see the current PID for Firefox is 3884, and that's the process identifier. So if we wanted to, just focus on Firefox, we could pipe the list to find string, and it only shows us Firefox. So it's the same as doing task list, we're just filtering it for just Firefox in this case. Now that 3884 PID is significant simply because the next thing I'm going to show you how to do is to kill the Firefox process. Now we're going to use that PID, but here's how you have to do the syntax to make it work. So we're going to do task kill / all caps PID space the PID number space / capital F for force. This way Windows is just going to kill it regardless. So if we enter that, we see Firefox running there. If we enter that command, what you're going to see is Firefox is no longer going to be running once we enter this, because what I'll do is after we enter this, I'll go ahead and do a find string again for Firefox, and you'll see it's not there. So let's go ahead and do a task list again. And we're going to pipe it to find string for Firefox, and you can see that it doesn't exist anymore. So essentially what we did is we killed Firefox. We stopped the process from running. This is, again, in the ethical hacking class. It would be very useful for you to know how to stop processes from the command line. So what I'm going to do now is write another file. This is another test file. This is another test. And we're just going to simply name that file test2.txt. And now I'm going to say and more test2.txt. And what we did is we just combined Windows commands. Now we could go ahead and string this out as long as we wanted. I can echo again, for example, to another file. Write that out and just call it test3.txt. And we could keep going. There's no limit here. We could keep going and keep going and keep going with stringing these commands together. So there's no limit or no immediate limit on how many commands you can string together. So what I did is ipconfig after doing all these other things. So we created 2 text files, we read one of them, and then we did ipconfig all in one string. And if we read test3 using the more command, we can see that it's that last text file that we created. Let me mark it and show you. Right there, we did that command and it's in our string, and that's what that text file is a result of. Now let's do something else. Let's create a user named Keatron Evans, give it a password, and then we'll say add, and Windows does it. Now let's make that user account an administrator, Keatron Evans, and we'll say add. So we'll show you the user accounts. We can see that Keatron Evans is now created, and I just issued net users to show us a list of all the user accounts on the machine. And if we want to see whether Keatron Evans is an administrator, we can do net local group without an S. Typoed it again. Alright, so it's net local group, take out the S, administrators. And it looks like I spelled administrators wrong. Yeah, this is what you call a bad syntax day for Keatron. Alright, let's slow down here. Administrators. There we go. So we could see that Keatron Evans is indeed a member of the administrator group. And again, these commands could be combined as well, using and. Now you can also use the two pipe symbols to combine commands as well. But keep in mind the difference here when we do and like so. What it does is the second command or any preceding commands depends on the first command running before the second one does. So if the first command had failed in this case, the second one would have never run. And that's good because you can't add an account to the administrators group if the account doesn't exist. Now I'm just going through and showing you where the accounts are here. But that's important to remember. The and is going to basically cause the command to run in sequence, cause the command to run in sequence, but only if every command works. So if you typo the first one, none of the other commands after that will actually run. Now using the two pipe symbols to combine commands is a little different because the preceding commands or the commands after the first one will run regardless of the success or failure of the first command. So for example, this account Keatron 2, we can add that. If we use the two two pipe symbols, so we can look and see if Keatron 2 was created. And it was. Now something interesting here, let's look at the group. Now notice Keatron 2 is not a member here. So that should tell you something interesting there. So as it turns out, maybe you should only use the two pipe symbols to combine commands when the second command is going to use output or use something from the first command. Now, I typically use and pretty much religiously just because I don't want to have to, if you're in a compromised system, why would you want to waste your brain power on thinking of, okay, which one should I use if the first command depends on the second one? Well, even if the first command doesn't, as I do another test here, it's still not going to hurt you to go ahead and use and. That way you're covered in every situation. Alright, so that's and that's pretty much the basics, the essential commands or the essentials of the Windows command line that we want you to know at least once you get there. It'd be real helpful if you knew this once you got into the class. And for those of you that aren't signed up for classes or not going to, these are just some good basic command line syntax things that you just need to know anyways. It's just going to only help you out being able to do more and more from the command line. Now obviously in the class we get a lot more in depth than just this with the command line. We do things like enabling remote desktop, editing the registry, and pretty much anything you can do from a GUI we try to demonstrate or try to prove that you can do the same from the command line in either operating system. And that's pretty much what we wanted you to get out of that. Now what I'm going to do now is I want to show you, I've got a TFTP server running on 102, which is my host here, and I'm just going to bring over pwdump, which is just a password hash dumper. And for pwdump to run, you also need samdump. So let's bring that over as well, samdump.dll. And then in addition to that, we need to run it. So once we get it there, let's go ahead and run it. So pwdump2, and we're going to write the results to a file named dumped.txt. Alright, so it appears that it ran. So let's try that. Let's more dumped.txt, and we can see that it is a text file that has the hashes for the passwords on this machine for each account. So what that shows us here is we can combine commands like TFTP and other commands as well. Now TFTP is something, the TFTP client is something you'll use religiously throughout any of our security hands-on lab classes, because we do a lot of moving files around, transferring files, and doing things like that. Now let's jump over to Linux, and we'll do some things like dir, which is what I just did, and ls, which is equivalent to dir. But I just wanted you to see that you can do both dir or ls to get a directory listing. Make directory works the same. You can do mkdir, and we just created a directory named test. Let's change to it so we can see that that works as well. So some things are the same on Windows, but some's different, like ipconfig. You can't do that on Linux. You have to do ifconfig to see your interfaces. Alright, and if you wanted to release your IP and get a new one, we could do DHCP ETH0, because that's the interface we're interested in. Alright, tells us it's already got an IP address essentially. So what we could do, let's do it the easy way first. We could get rid of this file that it's referring to here, the PID file, and then we could issue that command again, and it then will actually get an IP address. So there we go for looking at your network configuration. Now other things, netstat that we did on Windows, you can still do netstat here. You can do netstat an. It gives you the same output. Alright. Now if you want to get help, you can always just do netstat dash help, I believe it is, yeah, and you get a little help file. You could also man netstat to get more detailed information on the usage of netstat in Linux. And then you can do -L like so to just show you listening ports. Alright, let's move on to some other things. Another thing we did was task list in Windows, right? Well, that doesn't work in Linux. We have to do PS-A to get a list of running processes. Alright, and if we wanted to list just one process or a specific process, like I just started Firefox here, like we did on Windows. Alright, if we want to find that in the running processes on Linux, we could do PS-A, and then we pipe the results out to grep, because we did find str in Windows, right? Not work. Grep Firefox, and we see the Firefox processes that are running. Now in Windows we did task kill. That doesn't work in Linux, so we have to do something called kill. Now I'm doing the -9 to basically not allow an interrupt. In other words, Linux can't stop the kill command. So we kill the first one, and let's go ahead and kill the second Firefox process 10.433. And now if we do PS-A again, we'll see that Firefox is not running. Oh, I guess we should use the grep command since we're piping it to grep. Let's get rid of that. So we need to say pipe grep Firefox, and we can see that there's no Firefox running. Now just like with Windows, we can combine commands with the and tag in Linux just like we did in Windows. So for example, if I did ifconfig and PS-A, it'll do ifconfig, and then it'll jump right and do PS-A. So very similar in that regard as far as combining things. So these are just some what we like to call the very basic, very essential command line functions. If nothing else, you need to be able to find out what your IP address is, how to get another IP. You also need to be able to find out what's running. Now TFTP works a little different. We don't need to do a -I because we don't need to tell it binary mode, but we just TFTP to the IP, and then we say get. And we can see here, if we grep for pwdump, we can see that it did bring it over. Alright, so again, let's review the very basics, the very extreme basics. You need to know how to do the following things. Number one, you should be able to look and see what's in the current directory that you're in once you get on the command line, because a lot of our compromises, most of our compromises in all of our hacking classes, you're going to end up with command line access. So you're going to need to, be able to either know or figure out how to do some command line stuff. Now we walk you through a lot of this step by step in labs, but if you already got that knowledge, it's just going to make you go that much faster with your labs. So some basics. Know how to find out what's in the current directory you're in. Know how to find out what your current directory is, which is pwd in Linux. Also, you should know how to create a directory, because maybe you want to create a directory to bring stuff over. You should be able to check to see what your current IP is. Windows, that's ipconfig. Linux, it's ifconfig. You should be able to release your IP and get a new one. Windows, ipconfig/all, ipconfig/release, ipconfig/renew to get a new IP address. You should also be able to look to see listening connections. netstat-an does that in Linux and in Windows as well. Very important, you should be able to look and see what processes are currently running, and this is quite useful to see if they're running any type of AV or anything like that. And to do that, in Windows it's task list. In Linux it's PS --A. You should also be able to kill running processes. In Windows that would be task kill /PID space whatever the PID of the process is /F, which is to force it to kill the process. And in Linux you just do kill -9 whatever the PID of the process is. And then the last thing that we covered here is using TFTP to get stuff back and forth. TFTP is Trivial File Transfer Protocol. It's UDP based. It uses port 69. It's very fast. It's a very fast way to get stuff back and forth. And remember, people might not be watching UDP traffic as much as they're watching TCP. So this is a good way at least to get you started as far as moving things to and from. It's very lightweight. The client's very small. The TFTP server service is very small. So it gives you a very small footprint, quick, efficient way to get stuff back and forth from across the internet, across multiple machines, however you want to do it. And the one piece we added on here was the actual combining of commands, and we use and to string multiple Windows or Linux commands together. Now these are going to be essential skills for you to try to master, or at least have some exposure to it. And even if you're just watching the video, it kind of gives you an idea of some of the stuff that you'll be learning in the very first lab of the class. The very first lab in both classes will be about 30 minutes of going through doing some processes like this so that you can get comfortable living on the command line, because we do firmly believe that the most power of any operating system is on the shell or on the command line. So hopefully this video does some good for you. Thanks for watching.